The moment I knew my marriage was over wasn't when I found the texts. It wasn't when my daughter stopped returning my calls. It wasn't even when my son changed his last name. No. The moment I knew it was over was when I walked into Bellini's Italian kitchen on the evening of June 14th, carrying 25 red roses, one for each year, and saw my wife sitting in the private dining room I'd reserved 3 months ago. She was laughing. Her hand was resting on the forearm of a man I'd never seen before, and my children, both of them, Sophie and Ryan, were sitting across from them, smiling like this was the most natural thing in the world. Let me back up. My name is Marcus Daly. I'm 49 years old. I'm an electrician. I've owned Daly Electric since I was 31. Started it with a used van and a toolbox my father left me when he passed. I built it into a crew of 11 guys covering 3 counties in central Ohio. I'm not rich. I've never been rich. But I've never missed a mortgage payment, never bounced a check, and never once let my family go without something they needed. Diana and I met when we were 22. She was finishing her teaching degree at Ohio State, and I was pulling wire in the new science building on campus. She walked past me in the hallway wearing a yellow sundress, and I damn near electrocuted myself staring. I asked her out that same afternoon. She said no. I asked again the next day. She said no again, but she was smiling. Third day, she brought me a coffee and said, "Fine, but you're buying dinner." We were married 14 months later. For a long time, it was good, really good. Sophie came along when Diana was 26. Ryan 2 years after that. We bought a house on Maple Ridge, nothing fancy. 3 bedrooms, a big backyard, a garage I converted into my workshop. I coached Ryan's Little League team. I built Sophie a treehouse that was honestly nicer than some apartments I've wired. Diana taught 4th grade at Lincoln Elementary for 12 years before she decided to stay home when her mother got sick. After her mother passed, Diana didn't go back to teaching. She said she needed time. I understood. Then the time stretched into a year, then 2. She started going to the gym more, getting her nails done every other week, spending afternoons at the coffee shop with friends I'd never heard of. I didn't think much of it. I figured she was finding herself again after losing her mom. I wanted to give her space. That's what you do when you love someone, right? You give them room to breathe. I didn't know I was giving her room to find someone else. His name was Victor Calloway. I first heard his name about 18 months before that night at Bellini's. Diana mentioned him casually, a friend from the parent network at Sophie's old school. He was, according to her, a real estate investor, owned properties in 4 states, drove a black Mercedes, had season tickets to the Bengals, the kind of details she'd drop into conversation like she wasn't impressed but clearly was. I didn't feel threatened at first. I felt something worse. I felt embarrassed. Because every time she mentioned Victor's lake house or Victor's trip to Napa Valley, I heard the unspoken comparison. Victor's world versus mine. His Italian leather shoes versus my steel-toed boots. His wine tastings versus my Bud Light after a 12-hour pull. The changes were gradual. Diana started criticizing things she'd never cared about before. The truck in the driveway was an eyesore. My workshop smelled like solder and sawdust. Why didn't I wear cologne? Why didn't I take her anywhere nice? When was the last time I surprised her? I tried. God, I tried. I booked a weekend at a bed and breakfast in Hocking Hills. She canceled because she had plans with friends. I bought her a necklace for her birthday, sterling silver. Not cheap, and she thanked me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Then Ryan got involved. My son was 23, fresh out of community college with a business degree and no job prospects. He'd been living at home, sending out resumes, getting nowhere. Then one day he came downstairs in a new suit, a real suit, not the JCPenney one. I bought him for graduation and told me he'd been offered an internship at a real estate development firm in Columbus. That's great, son. Who's the firm? Callaway Capital. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Victor Callaway? Mom's friend? Ryan shrugged. He sees potential in me, Dad. He said I remind him of himself at my age. I wanted to say that any man who inserts himself into another man's family and starts offering favors to the son is not being generous. He's making a play. But Ryan was so excited, so proud of himself for the first time in years, that I swallowed it. Then came Sophie's wedding. My daughter had been engaged to a good kid named Derek for about a year. I'd been setting aside money since she was 16 a little every month, into a separate savings account, $27,000. Not a fortune, but enough for a nice wedding at the VFW hall with catering, a DJ, flowers, the whole thing. I was proud of that money. It represented nearly a decade of discipline, of saying no to myself so I could say yes to my little girl when the time came. In March, Sophie told me they'd changed the venue, not the VFW, A vineyard 40 minutes outside of Columbus. Victor knows the owner, she said. He's getting us a deal. How much of a deal? Dad, don't worry about it. Sophie, I've been saving for this. I want to pay for your wedding. That's my job. She hugged me and said, I know, Dad. We'll figure it out. We didn't figure it out. What happened was Diana withdrew the $27,000 from the savings account, an account with both our names on it, and gave it to Victor as an investment in one of his development projects, a condo complex in Dayton. He promised a 40% return in 6 months. Diana told me this after the money was already gone, sitting at the kitchen table, casual as if she'd switched our internet provider. You gave away Sophie's wedding fund? I invested it, Marcus. There's a difference. Victor's been doing this for years. He knows what he's doing. I know what he's doing too. She looked at me like I was a child throwing a tantrum. This is why we never get ahead. You're afraid of everything. I slept in the workshop that night. Things moved fast after that. The wedding planning was taken over by Diana and Victor. The venue, the caterer, the photographer, all arranged through Victor's connections. I was cut out of every decision. When I asked about costs, Diana told me Victor was helping with some of it as a gift. Then, 2 weeks before the wedding, Sophie called me. Dad, I need to talk to you about something. Anything, sweetheart. Victor has been really good to us, to me and Derek. He's paying for the honeymoon, and he's been like a mentor to Ryan. And, Dad, he asked if he could walk me down the aisle. The silence on my end lasted so long, she said, Dad, are you still there? Yeah, I'm here. It wouldn't mean you're not my father. It's just, he's been so generous, and Mom thinks. Your mother thinks a man she's known for a year should walk you down the aisle instead of the man who raised you for 26 years. Dad, please don't make this a thing. I didn't make it a thing. I made it nothing. I said, do what you want, Sophie, and hung up. Then I sat in my workshop for 3 hours, staring at the wall, and I did something I haven't done since my father's funeral. I cried. I didn't go to the wedding. I told Diana I had a job emergency, an electrical fire at a commercial building. She didn't argue. She didn't even look disappointed. She just said, okay, Marcus, and walked out in a dress I'd never seen before. My daughter got married at a vineyard in a gown, paid for by another man, walked down the aisle by that same man, while I sat alone in my truck in a Walmart parking lot eating a gas station sandwich. After the wedding, the distance became a canyon. Ryan was working full-time at Callaway Capital, wearing clothes I couldn't afford, talking about market capitalization and ROI at the dinner table like he'd been born into it. Sophie and Derek moved into a rental property owned by Victor below market rate, she said. Diana was spending 3-4 nights a week at networking events or investment meetings. I knew what was happening. I think I'd known for a while. But knowing and proving are different things. So I hired a private investigator, a guy named Frank Peltier, retired Columbus PD, recommended by my attorney. Frank was efficient. Within 2 weeks, he had photographs of Diana and Victor entering and leaving the same hotel room at the Hilton Garden Inn on 3 separate occasions. He had credit card receipts showing Victor buying Diana jewelry, clothes, a new phone. He had text messages obtained legally. Frank assured me that left absolutely nothing to the imagination. But Frank found something else, something bigger. Marcus, your wife's boyfriend isn't who he says he is. Victor Callaway's real name was Vincent Kowalski, originally from Scranton, Pennsylvania. He'd been running the same scheme for over a decade across 5 states. He'd target women in stable marriages, usually women going through some kind of emotional vulnerability, a death in the family, empty nest, midlife restlessness. He'd charm them, charm the kids, insert himself into the family. Then he'd get the women to invest money, their savings, home equity, retirement funds into fake development projects. The condos in Dayton, they didn't exist. The properties in 4 states, shell companies. The Callaway Capital office where my son worked, a rented suite with fake brochures and a part-time receptionist. Frank had connected Victor to 4 other families, 1 in Michigan, 1 in Kentucky, 2 in Indiana. Same playbook every time. Seduce the wife, win over the children, drain the finances, disappear. The FBI was already looking for him. They just hadn't found him yet because he kept changing names and states. I sat with that information for 3 days. 3 days of going to work, wiring houses, eating lunch with my crew, coming home, sitting across from my wife, and knowing everything. Knowing she was sleeping with a con man. Knowing my son was working for a criminal. Knowing my daughter's honeymoon was paid for with stolen money from another family. And I made a decision. I didn't yell. I didn't confront. I didn't throw things or change the locks or hire a divorce lawyer first. I called Special Agent Linda Chen at the FBI field office in Columbus. I gave her everything Frank had found. She thanked me and asked me to keep quiet for 72 hours while they prepared the arrest. Those were the longest 3 days of my life. On the 73rd day, which happened to be June 14th, our 25th wedding anniversary, I put on my one good suit, picked up 25 roses from the florist on Main Street, and drove to Bellini's. I'd made the reservation back in March, before everything fell apart. I'd kept it because, honestly, part of me still hoped for a miracle. Part of me hoped I'd walk in, and it would just be Diana, smiling the way she used to, and she'd say she was sorry and it was over with Victor and could we start again. Instead, I walked in and saw them. Diana, Victor, my son, my daughter, sitting in my reserved table drinking wine, laughing. Diana saw me first. Her face went through about 6 expressions in 2 seconds: surprise, guilt, annoyance, and then something I can only describe as pity. Like I was a stray dog that had wandered into the wrong restaurant. Marcus. She stood up. What are you doing here? It's our anniversary, Diana. I told you, I have dinner plans tonight. Yeah, I can see that. I looked at Victor. He had the decency to stop smiling, but not the decency to stand up or leave. He just sat there, watching me with this calm, appraising expression, like I was a minor inconvenience. Dad, Ryan said, shifting uncomfortably. This is awkward. Is it? I made this reservation 3 months ago. For your mother and me. 25 years. Sophie wouldn't meet my eyes. Derek, her husband, was staring at his plate like he wanted to dissolve into it. Victor finally spoke. Marcus, I think it's probably best if I'm not talking to you. The table went quiet. I looked at Diana. 25 roses, 1 for each year. You want to know what I was going to say tonight? I was going to say that even though this year has been the hardest of my life, I still love you. I was going to say I forgive you. I was going to ask you to come home. Diana's lip trembled. For a moment, just a moment, I saw the girl in the yellow sundress. Then she straightened up and said, Marcus, I think we've grown apart. Victor has shown me what life can. Victor has shown you a lie. I set the roses on the table. Enjoy your dinner, all of you. I mean that sincerely. Enjoy tonight. And I walked out. The arrests happened the next morning. FBI agents picked up Victor Vincent at the apartment he'd been renting under a false name in Upper Arlington. They seized his computers, his phones, and his records. The condo project in Dayton was a complete fabrication. Callaway Capital had 0 assets. Every dollar that had been invested was gone, spent on maintaining Victor's lifestyle, his Mercedes lease, his hotel rooms, the gifts and trips he used to lure his targets. Diana was arrested 2 days later, not as a victim, as a co-conspirator. See, the thing about my wife investing our $27,000 wasn't just that she'd been foolish. It was that she'd also been helping Victor recruit other investors, 2 families at her gym, 1 couple from her book club. She'd vouched for Victor, told them she'd seen the returns herself, encouraged them to put in money. That's called wire fraud when the money crosses state lines. That's a federal charge. Ryan was let go from Callaway Capital, obviously, because Callaway Capital no longer existed. He wasn't charged. The FBI determined he genuinely didn't know what was going on, but his name was now connected to a federal fraud investigation. Every job application, every background check, every Google search of his name would pull up articles about Vincent Kowalski's arrest and the people who worked for him. Sophie's honeymoon money? Traced back to a retired teacher in Muncie, Indiana, who'd given Victor her entire pension. 63 years old, living on Social Security. Sophie had to write that woman a letter. The trial took 8 months. Victor Vincent was convicted on 14 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of identity theft, and 2 counts of money laundering. He got 17 years. Diana pleaded guilty to 1 count of wire fraud in exchange for testimony against Victor. She got 14 months at a federal minimum security facility in West Virginia. The house on Maple Ridge went into foreclosure because Diana had taken out a second mortgage I didn't know about. She'd forged my signature and put that money into Victor's scheme too. $80,000. Gone. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment above the hardware store on 5th Street. It smelled like paint thinner and the radiator knocked all night, but it was mine. Nobody else's. Just mine. It took Ryan 4 months to come see me. He showed up at the apartment on a Tuesday evening, still wearing one of those expensive suits from his Callaway Capital days, though it was wrinkled now and the shirt underneath was from Target. He stood in the doorway looking like he'd shrunk 3 inches. Dad. Ryan. Can I come in? I stepped aside. He walked in, looked around the apartment, the fold-out table, the single chair, The TV I'd had since 2009, and I watched something break behind his eyes. Dad, I'm sorry. For what specifically? He flinched. For all of it. For taking the job. For not listening when you tried to warn me. For choosing him over you. You didn't just choose him, Ryan. You let another man be your father. You wore his clothes. You took his name, yeah, I know about that. You filed the paperwork to change your last name to Calloway. Did you think I wouldn't find out? He was crying now. Standing in my tiny apartment in his wrinkled suit. Crying like he was 12 years old and not 25. I withdrew the petition, he said. I never went through with it. But you started it. That's the part I can't get past, son. You didn't just drift away. You actively tried to erase me. I know. Do you? Because here's what I don't think you understand. I would have given you everything I had. I would have sold the business, sold the truck, sold every tool in my workshop if you needed it. You didn't need Victor Calloway to be someone. You just needed time. But time wasn't exciting enough. Time didn't come with a Mercedes and a corner office. Ryan sat down on the edge of my bed, the only other place to sit, and put his face in his hands. I let him cry. I didn't go to him. I didn't put my arm around him. And that might make me a bad father, but I'd spent the last 2 years being a good father to people who didn't want one, and I was tired. I love you, Ryan. I've never stopped. But I'm not going to pretend you didn't hurt me just to make you feel better. You're going to have to sit with what you did. He nodded. He left 20 minutes later. We didn't hug. Sophie came the following week. She brought Derek and a casserole, like food could fill the hole her choices had made. She gave me the same apology Ryan did. More polished, more rehearsed. She'd always been the smoother talker. Daddy, I know I let you down. You let a stranger walk you down the aisle, Sophie. On the most important day of your life, you looked at the man who built you a treehouse, who taught you to ride a bike, who held you during thunderstorms, and you decided he wasn't good enough to stand next to you. I was wrong. Yes, you were. Can you forgive me? I looked at my daughter, 27 years old, married, a whole life ahead of her, and I thought about what forgiveness actually means. It doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. It means choosing to carry less weight. I can work toward it, I said, but it's not something I can hand you today like a gift. You're going to have to earn it, and it's going to take a long time, and there are going to be days when I look at you and still see that empty chair at your wedding where I should have been. She cried. Derek stared at the floor. They left the casserole. I ate it over 3 days. It was pretty good, actually. Diana wrote me a letter from West Virginia. 6 pages, front and back. She said she was sorry. She said Victor had manipulated her. She said she never meant for things to go so far. She said she still loved me. I read it once. Then I folded it up and put it in a drawer. Here's what I know now, a year and a half later. I know that my ex-wife is out of prison and living with her sister in Toledo. I know that Ryan is working as a junior electrician for a company in Dayton. Not my company, but the trade I taught him when he was 15. He calls me every Sunday. The conversations are short, sometimes awkward, but they're real. I know that Sophie and Derek are expecting their first child. She asked me if I'd be in the delivery room. I said yes. I know that Victor Calloway, Vincent Kowalski, is sitting in a federal prison in Elkton, Ohio, and he won't be out until he's nearly 70. And I know this. The hardest thing I've ever done wasn't wiring a commercial building in a rainstorm, or starting a business with nothing, or raising 2 kids on a working man's salary. The hardest thing I've ever done was walking out of that restaurant with 25 roses and not looking back. Because here's the truth. Nobody tells you about betrayal. It doesn't just break your heart. It breaks your story. The story you told yourself about who you are and what your life means. I was Marcus Daly, husband, father, provider. And then one day I was Marcus Daly, man whose family chose someone else. But here's the other truth. You get to write a new story. It's shorter. It's quieter. It doesn't have a vineyard or a Mercedes or a private dining room, but it's honest, and it's mine. I'm sitting in my apartment right now. It's a Saturday morning. The radiator's still knocking. I've got coffee and a crossword puzzle, and the window's open because spring came early this year. In an hour, I'm going to drive to the hardware store and buy lumber because I'm building a crib for my grandchild. I'm going to build it with my own hands in my own workshop. I rented a small garage space on 3rd Street, and it's going to be the most beautiful thing I've ever made. And when my daughter asks me who made it, I'll tell her. Your father, the one who never left. If you're watching this and you're going through something similar, if the person you loved chose someone who seemed shinier, richer, more exciting, I want you to hear me. You are not less than. You were never less than. The people who leave aren't measuring your worth. They're revealing their own. And sometimes the only way to save yourself is to let the people who hurt you live with the consequences of their choices, not out of cruelty, out of respect for yourself. Thanks for listening. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment. Tell me your story. I'll read every single one. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. I'll see you in the next one.